The antimatter torpedoes struck the crystal cities with the force of miniature suns, and the light of their detonation painted the bridge of the Leviathan in colors that would live forever in the nightmares of everyone who witnessed them, Captain. Ben Torres had given the order because 20 years of war had taught him that hesitation meant death. But the explosion patterns on his tactical display showed no military installations, burning only schools and hospitals and homes. The gravitational wave generators fired their invisible destruction into the planet's surface, causing massive earthquakes that shattered the beautiful crystal spires, while the aliens inside them died without understanding why visitors from the stars had chosen violence over peace. Jake Morrison watched the main screen fill with images of devastation that exceeded anything human weapons had achieved during the war against the Krillian Empire, because those enemies had been prepared for battle while these aliens had been prepared only for welcome scanning. Officer Joe Martin reported energy signatures that revealed the true nature of the alien installations they had destroyed, and his voice broke as he listed cultural centers and research facilities and monuments to peace where weapons had never existed. The fusion bombs continued their work, burning through the atmosphere of a world where children had been learning songs of greeting, while human targeting computers had calculated the most efficient methods for ending their lives. Admiral Lisa Park stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by displays showing casualty estimates that climbed into the millions, while the surviving aliens broadcast their final messages on frequencies filled with static, and Payne Amy Stone worked desperately to translate the alien transmissions. But the mathematical beauty of their language was being replaced by the chaos of dying communication networks and the last words of civilizations that had taken centuries to build. The planet below burned with fires that would consume everything the aliens had created over thousands of years of choosing cooperation over conflict and art over warfare. Dr. Alex Turner received biological data from his sensors that confirmed the aliens were physiologically incapable of the kind of aggression that humans had developed during their evolutionary history. The crystal monument that had broadcast the aliens' cultural history was now a crater filled with radioactive glass, while the stories it had tried to tell floated through space as scattered data fragments. Chris Johnson picked up transmissions from the few surviving communication centers, and his translation protocols revealed messages that spoke of forgiveness, rather than anger and sorrow for humanity, rather than hatred. The alien space stations that had been preparing to welcome human visitors were now debris fields drifting through orbits that would decay over the next few centuries. Nicole White stared at her weapons console, where readouts showed the devastating effectiveness of human military technology when applied to beings who had never learned to defend themselves against such overwhelming force. Major Steve Brown received reports from his assault teams that were no longer needed because there was nothing left to assault, except ruins and refugees and the occasional survivor who emerged from underground shelters. The few aliens who remained alive sent their final transmission to the Leviathan, and Dr. Turner translated their words in real time, while his voice carried the weight of understanding that came too late to save anyone. The message spoke of forgiveness for the humans who had destroyed their world, because the aliens recognized that such violence could only come from a species that had suffered terrible trauma during their development. The dying aliens expressed their hope that humanity would someday find the peace that their own species had discovered after centuries of learning to heal the psychological damage that made intelligent beings choose warfare over cooperation. Katie Brooks analyzed the remains of the alien civilization and found no evidence of military technology or weapons research or any preparation for conflict because they had eliminated such things from their society generations ago. The planet continued burning, while the Leviathan hung in space, surrounded by the debris of peaceful space stations and the scattered remains of beings who had spent their final hours trying to welcome visitors from another world. Dr. Rachel Kim received medical data that showed the aliens had been broadcasting healing techniques that could have helped humanity recover from the trauma that made them see enemies where none existed. Jake Morrison looked at his crew and saw the same devastating realization reflected in every face because they had responded to a greeting with genocide and turned first contact into the last contact. This species would ever experience. Admiral Park began composing her report to Earth Command, knowing that she would have to explain how humanity's first encounter with alien intelligence had ended in the destruction of beings whose only crime was offering friendship. The tactical displays showed the efficiency of human weapons systems that had been designed to end wars quickly and completely, but had instead ended a civilization that had already learned to live without war. Ryan Hayes detected the final transmission from the planet's surface, where a group of alien survivors used their last moments to broadcast a message of hope that humanity would learn from this tragedy. The message included scientific data that showed how species could evolve beyond the need for violence and cultural techniques for healing the psychological damage that made intelligent beings choose destruction over creation. Ben Torres faced the knowledge that his military experience and combat instincts had led him to destroy exactly the kind of peaceful society that humanity claimed to be fighting to protect. The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet hum of systems monitoring a dead world, while the crew processed the magnitude of what they had done to beings who had greeted them with joy. Amy Stone continued working with the translation systems, trying to preserve as much as possible of the alien culture and language that would never again be spoken by its native speakers. The few surviving aliens sent their final gift to humanity in the form of mathematical proofs and scientific discoveries that could help any species learn to choose peace over war if they had the courage to abandon the familiar patterns of conflict. Dr. Turner realized that the aliens had been trying to share the secret of how intelligent species could evolve beyond territorial aggression and competitive violence into something approaching true civilization. The Leviathan prepared to leave the system carrying the knowledge that humanity had encountered their first alien civilization, and within hours had reduced it to radioactive ruins and scattered refugees. Jake Morrison made the final entry in his command log recording that every energy signature they had detected had indeed meant extinction, but not for humanity. Instead, for an entire species that had simply wanted to welcome Earth's children to the galaxy. The ship turned away from the burning world while its crew carried the weight of understanding that the greatest threat to peaceful first contact had not been alien hostility, but human fear transformed into overwhelming destructive capability. Behind them, the planet continued burning, while ahead of them lay the journey home, where they would have to explain how humanity's greatest military achievement had become their greatest moral failure. The crystal monument at the planet's north pole began to glow with an intensity that made every sensor aboard the Leviathan scream warnings about massive energy buildup and imminent weapon discharge. Dr. Alex Turner ran through the ship's corridors toward the bridge while shouting into his communicator that the energy patterns were wrong for weapons and right for something he had never seen before. The monument grew brighter until it became visible to the naked eye through the main viewer. as a pillar of light that stretched from the planet's surface into space itself. Captain Ben Torres watched his tactical displays show energy readings that exceeded everything they had recorded during the war with the Krillian Empire, and he knew that waiting any longer might mean the destruction of his ship and crew. Greg Palmer announced that the alien energy buildup was reaching critical levels, and his voice carried the urgency that came from watching what appeared to be a planet killer, weapon charging to full power. The crystal structure pulsed once and then released a wave of energy that swept across space toward the Leviathan, while every human on the bridge prepared to die in the next few seconds. Instead of destruction, the energy wave carried information that flooded the ship's communication systems with images and sounds that told the story of an entire civilization. Amy Stone stared at her translation console as alien data streams began resolving into recognizable patterns that showed cities being built and wars ending and a species learning to live in peace. The monument was broadcasting the complete history of the alien civilization, from their primitive beginnings through bloody conflicts that looked remarkably similar to human wars, and finally to their transformation into the peaceful society that existed today. Dr. Turner burst onto the bridge just as the alien transmission began showing images of their ancient weapons being dismantled and converted into tools for building rather than destroying. The energy readings that had seemed so threatening were coming from a historical archive that contained every significant moment in alien cultural development, including their decision to abandon warfare forever. Jake Morrison watched the main screen fill with images of alien children learning in schools where former weapons factories had been converted into centers of education, and art. Chris Johnson worked frantically to process the massive data transmission while reporting that the aliens were trying to share everything they knew about themselves in a desperate attempt at communication. The historical archive showed wars that had nearly destroyed the alien civilization, followed by a period of rebuilding that emphasized cooperation over conflict and understanding over domination. Katie Brooks analyzed the cultural data flowing through their systems and reported that the alien species had evolved beyond territorial competition into something that resembled a planet-wide family. Ben Torres stared at his weapons display where targeting solutions for maximum destruction were locked onto cities filled with beings who had chosen peace over war centuries ago. The alien transmission included mathematical proofs and scientific discoveries that showed a species dedicated to exploration and knowledge rather than conquest and expansion. Nicole White reported that her weapon systems were still charging toward full readiness, while the main screen showed alien hospitals where former soldiers had been retrained as healers. The monument continued broadcasting cultural achievements that included art forms and music that celebrated life, while human-targeting computers calculated the most efficient methods for ending that same life. Amy Stone finally achieved a breakthrough in translation when the alien language began resolving into concepts that human minds could understand, and the first clear message was an expression of joy at meeting other intelligent beings. The energy signatures that had looked like weapons installations were actually power sources for massive art projects that created the light displays the crew had been watching for hours. Dr. Turner announced that the aliens were trying to welcome humanity into what appeared to be a galactic community of peaceful species that shared knowledge and resources. Major Brown listened to reports of alien cities where former military installations had been converted into facilities for healing trauma and helping individuals recover from the psychological damage of ancient conflicts. The historical transmission showed the exact moment when the alien species had made their collective decision to end warfare, and the ceremonies where they had destroyed their final weapons. Tyler Ross calculated that the aliens had been broadcasting their cultural history for several hours, which meant they had been trying to establish peaceful contact since the moment the Leviathan arrived. Dr. Kim received medical data from the alien transmission that showed healing techniques and medicines that could help species recover from the physical and psychological damage of war. The monument pulsed again, and this time the transmission included personal messages from individual aliens who expressed their excitement at meeting beings from another world. Chris Johnson reported that the aliens were broadcasting on frequencies that would be impossible to use for military communication, but perfect for sharing art and cultural information. The weapon systems aboard the Leviathan reached full charge just as the alien transmission began showing images of their space stations, which had been built not for defense, but for welcoming visitors from other star systems. Ben Torres faced the terrible realization that his ship was targeting a civilization that had spent centuries learning to heal the damage caused by exactly the kind of warfare that humanity had perfected. The crystal cities on the planet's surface dimmed, not because they were preparing for attack, but because the aliens had recognized the threatening posture of the human warship and were trying to appear less intimidating. Nicole White stared at her weapons console, where enough firepower to destroy continents waited for orders to fire on beings who had chosen to transform their swords into instruments of peace. The alien transmission reached its climax with a message that Amy Stone translated in real time as it flowed across the communication systems, and her voice broke as she read the words that would haunt the crew forever. The message was simple and devastating in its innocence, because it said, "Welcome friends from the distant stars. We have waited so long to meet others who travel between worlds, and we hope you will join us in the great work of building peace among all living beings." Jake Morrison looked at his crew and saw the same terrible understanding reflected in every face, because they had come prepared for war and found instead a species that had learned to choose love over fear. The seconds stretched toward infinity, while the most powerful weapons humanity had ever created remained aimed at the most peaceful civilization they had ever encountered. Ben Torres raised his hand toward the firing control, and the bridge fell silent, except for the continued transmission of alien hopes and dreams and welcome songs. The human delegation sat in their assigned quarters, staring at the 3 data pads that had been delivered an hour after their council presentation. Each pad contained detailed terms for becoming a client species under one of the major galactic powers. None of the terms were what anyone would call generous. Ambassador Lisa Carter read through the Kethnari proposal first. They want exclusive mining rights to our asteroid belt, plus 20% of Earth's population relocated to their crystal farms as workers. In exchange, we get protection and access to basic galactic technology. General Roy Phillips snorted in disgust. Crystal farms. That sounds ominous. Dr. Amy Jang looked up from the Moore Dune offer. This one wants our oceans. Not access to them, but actual ownership. They plan to establish underwater cities and use human labor to maintain their facilities. We would become caretakers of our own planet. Commander Pete Rodriguez shook his head as he read the Urgoth terms. These are the worst. They want to recruit half our military-age population as auxiliary troops for their expansion campaigns. Plus, they want to establish training facilities on Earth to turn our people into soldiers for their wars. Lisa sat down, her data pad, and rubbed her temples. 3 different ways to enslave our species. Captain Jake Morrison had been quiet since they returned from the council chambers, but now he spoke up. "I have been thinking about what General Phillips observed during the presentation. About how these aliens interact with each other." Roy nodded grimly. "They have created a system where nobody fights real wars anymore. Everything is settled through intimidation and shows of force. The strong make demands and the weak comply." Amy pulled up her xenobiology notes on her tablet. "I have been analyzing their behavior patterns and social structures. Every species in that chamber follows the same basic hierarchy. Submit to those stronger than you and dominate those weaker than you. It is like a massive pyramid scheme." Pete stood and began pacing the small room. "But what happens when someone refuses to play by those rules? What happens when someone says no and means it?" "They get crushed," Lisa replied. "Like the Zenkar that High Chancellor Vextar mentioned. Their entire civilization wiped out in 4 days. Roy leaned forward in his chair. "But think about what he actually told us. It took 6 major powers working together 4 days to defeat one independent species. That suggests the Zenkar put up a real fight." Jake activated the room's security privacy screen to make sure their conversation could not be monitored. "What are you thinking, General?" "I am thinking about Earth Command's contingency plans," Roy said carefully. "About what we were told to do if diplomatic contact went badly." Lisa looked alarmed. "Roy, we cannot seriously be considering military action. We are one ship surrounded by thousands of alien vessels. Earth is just one planet against an entire galactic civilization." Amy pulled up star charts on her tablet showing the local region of space. "Actually, the numbers might not be as bad as they seem. Look at how galactic territory is divided. The major powers control huge areas, but their actual military presence is spread very thin." She highlighted several star systems near Earth. "Most of these have only token garrisons. The aliens rely on their reputation and fear to maintain control. They do not expect to face serious resistance." Pete stopped pacing and looked at each of his companions. "So, what are we really talking about here? Are we discussing surrender terms, or are we discussing war?" The question hung in the air for a long moment. Jake thought about Earth and the billions of people who had no idea their future was being decided in this sterile alien station. He thought about human history and all the times his species had faced impossible odds and somehow found a way to survive. "Before we make any decisions, we need more information," he said finally. "Amy, what else have you learned about galactic military capabilities?" Dr. Zhang scrolled through her data. "Their technology is definitely superior in most areas, but not by as much as they want us to believe. Their energy weapons are more powerful than ours, but their targeting systems are actually less sophisticated. Their shields are stronger, but they seem to have weaknesses that could be exploited." Roy activated his own tablet, showing classified military assessments. Earth Command has been studying intercepted alien communications for years. Our analysts believe most galactic species have not fought a real war in centuries. Their military doctrine is based on overwhelming shows of force, rather than actual combat effectiveness. Lisa stood and walked to the small window overlooking the station's docking bays. "Even if we could somehow win a military confrontation, the cost would be enormous. We would be declaring war on the entire galaxy, would we?" Pete asked. "Or would we be declaring independence from a system that treats freedom as a crime?" Amy looked up from her research. "There is something else to consider. I have been monitoring communications between different species here on the station. There is more unrest than the Council wants to admit. Several client species are unhappy with their treatment." She showed them intercepted data streams displaying what looked like protest movements and underground resistance groups. The Galactic Order is not as stable as it appears. There are cracks. In the Foundation, Jake studied the information carefully. You think a successful act of defiance might inspire others to rebel? It is possible, Amy replied. The whole system depends on everyone believing that resistance is hopeless. If we prove that wrong, it could start something much bigger. Roy stood and activated a secure communication channel to the Liberty's edge. Captain Morrison, this is General Phillips. I need to speak with Earth Command immediately on Priority Alpha Channel. Lisa looked startled. Roy, what are you doing? Getting the information we need to make an informed decision, he replied as the connection established. Admiral Kate Sullivan appeared on the small screen looking tired but alert. She was in Earth Command's war room, and Jake could see other officers working at stations behind her. General Phillips' report, she said briskly. How did first contact proceed? Roy quickly summarized their presentation to the Council and the three options they had been given. Admiral Sullivan's expression grew grimmer with each detail. So they want to make us slaves, she said when he finished. That is about what we expected based on our intelligence analysis. Lisa stepped into view of the camera. Admiral, surely there must be a diplomatic solution. Some way to negotiate better terms or find a compromise. Sullivan shook her head. Ambassador, with respect, we have been monitoring their communication since you arrived. The Council has already decided humanity's fate. They view us as primitives to be exploited, not equals to be respected. Jake moved closer to the screen. What are Earth's options, Admiral? Officially, we have three choices, Sullivan replied. Accept client status under one of the major powers, face military action from the entire Galactic Council, or activate Protocol 7. The humans in the room exchanged glances. Protocol 7 was Earth's most classified military contingency plan designed for exactly this scenario. Pete looked directly at the Admiral. What is the current status of our defensive preparations? Sullivan's smile was cold and sharp. All orbital. Defense platforms are online and fully armed. The home fleet is at battle stations, but maintaining normal patrol patterns to avoid detection. Our stealth reconnaissance ships have been gathering intelligence on alien military capabilities for the past week. Amy leaned forward. What did they find? Exactly what our long-range analysis suggested, the Admiral replied. Superior individual ship technology, but poor tactical doctrine and coordination. They fight like a police force, not like a military. All their recent conflicts have been against species that surrendered quickly. Roy nodded grimly. They have forgotten how to fight an opponent that fights back. Admiral Sullivan activated her own tactical displays. The nearest major alien fleet base is 6 light years away. Even with their faster-than-light technology, it would take them at least 2 weeks to assemble a significant force and reach Earth. 2 weeks, Jake repeated. What can we accomplish in 2 weeks? Enough to make them regret underestimating us, Sullivan replied. The question is whether you are prepared to cross that line. Once we activate Protocol 7, there will be no going back. Lisa sank into her chair, looking overwhelmed. We would be starting a war that could destroy our entire civilization. Pete sat down across from her. Lisa, they have already decided to destroy our civilization. The only question is whether we go down fighting or go down on our knees. Amy was still analyzing alien data on her tablet. There is another factor to consider. I have been studying their communication networks and transportation systems. The galactic infrastructure is incredibly complex, but also incredibly fragile. She showed them a three-dimensional map of galactic space with colored lines indicating trade routes and communication relays. If a few key systems were disrupted, it would take months to restore full connectivity between distant regions. The major powers depend on that infrastructure to coordinate their activities and maintain control over their territories. Roy studied the display with professional interest. Strategic targets? Exactly, Amy confirmed. And most of them are only lightly defended because no one has ever tried to attack galactic infrastructure before. Ambassador Lisa Carter stepped forward on the platform and activated the holographic display system the aliens had provided. The first image showed Earth as seen from space, with its blue oceans and white clouds. A murmur went through the assembled aliens as they saw humanity's homeworld for the first time. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Lisa began in her most diplomatic voice. I am Ambassador Lisa Carter, representing the United Earth Government and all of humanity. We come before you seeking recognition as a sovereign species and the opportunity to establish peaceful trade and cultural exchange. The hologram changed to show images of human cities with their towering buildings and bustling streets. Then came pictures of human achievements in space, including orbital stations and the first colony ships heading to nearby star systems. Humanity has achieved faster than light travel through our own research and development, Lisa continued. We have established peaceful contact with you through our own efforts. We bring unique perspectives and technologies that could benefit the entire galactic community. War Speaker Grokmash interrupted with a snort of amusement. One star system and a handful of primitive colonies. How impressive. Several other aliens laughed, and Lisa felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she pressed on. The hologram now showed human scientific achievements, including fusion power and quantum computing. Our species may be young by galactic standards, but we learn quickly and adapt faster than most. We have overcome challenges that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly wiped us out, yet we emerged stronger each time. Mediator Zilf's tentacles writhed in what might have been dismissal. Pretty words, but what do you actually offer? What resources does your tiny territory contain? What services can your people provide? Lisa had expected this question and was ready with detailed surveys and economic projections. But before she could respond, High Chancellor Vextar raised one crystal hand for silence. The Council has already reviewed your species' capabilities and territorial holdings, he announced in a tone that suggested the matter was settled. Your technological achievements, while adequate for a developing species, are centuries behind Council standards. Your military consists of a few dozen ships that would be considered patrol boats by our standards. Your territorial claim encompasses exactly one star system with limited strategic value. General Roy Phillips stepped forward. With respect, High Chancellor, our military capabilities may surprise you. Human engineering focuses on efficiency and adaptability rather than raw size. This brought more laughter from the assembled aliens. A creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a tree spoke from one of the middle tiers. All developing species claim their primitive weapons are somehow superior, it said in a voice like rustling leaves. Yet when faced with true galactic power, they all submit quickly enough. Vextar nodded agreement. The Galactic Council has maintained peace and order for over 1,000 years. We have done this by ensuring that every species understands their proper place in the hierarchy. Strength and capability determine position. Those with greater power protect those with less in exchange for resources and loyalty. Dr. Amy Zhang spoke up from her position behind Lisa. And what happens to species that prefer to remain independent? The question brought a moment of silence to the chamber. Then War Speaker Grokmash grinned, showing his steel teeth. Independence is a luxury that only the strong can afford, small human. The galaxy is full of dangers that would crush a species like yours in days. Pirates, raiders, and hostile empires that view unprotected worlds as easy prey. Without the Council's protection, your homeworld would be nothing but radioactive ash within. A solar cycle. Commander Pete Rodriguez stepped closer to the group. His hand did not move toward his weapon, but his posture shifted slightly. Jake noticed the change and felt tension building in his own muscles. Lisa tried to steer the conversation back to diplomacy. We appreciate the Council's concern for our safety. Perhaps we could discuss terms for a gradual integration that allows humanity to maintain some autonomy while benefiting from galactic protection. High Chancellor Vextar's crystal form pulsed with brighter light. You misunderstand your situation, Ambassador. This is not a negotiation. The Council does not bargain with Category 4 species. We are informing you of the decision that has already been made. The holographic display above the platform changed without Lisa's input. Now it showed a detailed breakdown of Earth's resources, including mineral deposits, population centers, and industrial capacity mediator. Zilf studied the data with obvious interest. Significant water reserves and a large population of potential workers. The Mordoon Collective could make good use of both, War Speaker Grokmash disagreed loudly. The humans show warrior potential despite their primitive technology. They would serve the Urgoth clans better as auxiliary troops and ship crews. A new voice joined the debate from high in the chamber tiers. This alien looked like living shadow with glowing yellow eyes. The Void Syndicate requires new mining worlds, and the human system contains several unexploited asteroid fields. Jake watched in growing disbelief as more and more council members began discussing Earth and humanity as if they were property to be divided. No one asked what the humans wanted. No one seemed to care about human preferences or rights. Roy leaned close to Lisa and whispered urgently. They are not negotiating with us. They are auctioning us off. Lisa nodded grimly, but kept her diplomatic mask in place. Honored council members, surely there is room in the galaxy for species that prefer independence. Humanity has much to offer as willing partners rather than unwilling subjects. The laughter that greeted this statement was louder and more mocking than before. High Chancellor Vexatar rose from his throne, and his voice filled the chamber. Independence, he repeated as if the word tasted bad. Do you know what happens to species that insist on independence, little human? They die. They die because they are too proud or too stupid to accept protection. They die because they think their tiny accomplishments make them equal to powers that have ruled the galaxy for millennia. The crystal being activated his own holographic display, showing a star system that had been reduced to debris and radiation. The Zenkar insisted on independence 300 years ago, Vextar continued. They believed their superior technology and warrior culture made them untouchable. The Council tried to reason with them, just as we are trying to reason with you. They refused all offers of protection and alliance. The image changed to show fleets of warships converging on the doomed system. It took the combined fleets of 6 major powers exactly 4 days to reduce their civilization to cosmic dust. Not because we wanted to destroy them, but because they left us no choice. Independence is chaos. Independence is death. Dr. Amy Zhang stepped forward with her tablet clutched tightly. What about smaller species that have managed to remain independent? Surely some have succeeded. War Speaker Grokmash's laugh was like grinding metal. Name. One scientist. Name a single species that has maintained true independence for more than a generation. Amy looked through her cultural database frantically, but found nothing. Every species mentioned in the galactic records was either a major power ruling over others, or a client species, serving someone stronger. Commander Pete Rodriguez spoke quietly to the group. Notice how they keep using the word protection. Protection. From what exactly? From who, mediator? Zilf seemed to hear him despite his low voice. From each other, of course. The strong prey upon the weak, unless the stronger prevent it. The Council maintains order by ensuring that predation follows proper channels and serves the greater good. Jake felt sick to his stomach. The galactic community was not what humanity had hoped for. It was not a federation of equals working together for mutual benefit. It was a carefully structured pyramid of exploitation with the strongest at the top and everyone else arranged below according to their ability to serve. General Phillips had been studying the chamber layout and the behavior of different species throughout the presentation. Now he moved closer to Jake and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Captain, look at how they respond to each other. Watch the body language and positioning. Jake followed Roy's gaze and began to see what the general meant. Every interaction between species followed the same pattern. The stronger ones spoke and the weaker ones listened. When disagreements arose, they were settled by appeals to higher authority, never by direct confrontation between equals. They have forgotten how to fight real wars, Roy continued quietly. Everything is about hierarchy and intimidation. I do not think they remember what it means to face an opponent who refuses to submit. High Chancellor Vextar called for silence again, and the chamber quieted. The Council has heard enough. Humanity will be granted 72 hours to choose which major power they wish to serve. The Kethnari Empire, the Mordoon Collective, or the Urgoth clans will accept your species as clients and provide appropriate protection. Ambassador Carter found her voice again. And if we refuse all three options, the crystal being's form blazed with cold light. Then you will face the consequences of that choice. The Council cannot permit chaos to spread. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty's Edge, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. Nexus Station was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It stretched for miles in every direction with gleaming metal towers and spinning rings that caught the light from 3 nearby stars. Ships of all shapes and sizes moved around it like insects around a giant flower. Captain, we are receiving docking instructions, said Lieutenant Sam Taylor from the communications station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the excitement underneath. This was the moment humanity had been working toward for 5 years, since they first detected alien signals from deep space. Ambassador Lisa Carter walked onto the bridge wearing her best diplomatic uniform. She looked calm and professional, but Jake knew she had to be nervous. Behind her came General Roy Phillips in his military dress uniform with enough ribbons and medals to show he was someone important. Dr. Amy Jang followed, carrying a tablet full of xenobiology notes and cultural observations she had been studying for months. "How do we look, Captain?" Lisa asked as she moved to stand beside his command chair. "Like we belong here," Jake replied, with more confidence than he felt. The Liberty's Edge was humanity's finest diplomatic vessel, but compared to some of the alien ships they had passed on approach, it looked small and primitive. Commander Pete Rodriguez appeared from the security station. "All diplomatic personnel are ready, Ambassador. Security teams are in position but staying low profile as ordered. Lisa nodded. The plan was to appear friendly and peaceful while keeping their military capabilities hidden. Earth Command had been very clear about this. Show strength, but do not threaten. Demonstrate capability, but do not provoke. It was a delicate balance. The communications panel beeped, and Sam looked up. "We have an incoming transmission from the station. Multiple species represented, put it on screen," Jake ordered. The main display changed to show 3 very different alien beings standing in what appeared to be a formal reception chamber. The first was tall and made of what looked like living, crystal that pulsed with internal light. The second had multiple tentacles instead of arms and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. The third was heavily armored and built like a tank with tusks and glowing red eyes. The crystal being spoke first, and somehow the words came through in perfect English. "Greetings, primitive species. I am High Chancellor Vextar of the Keth-Nari Empire. You will follow our docking instructions precisely and submit to all security procedures without question." The tentacled creature added in a voice like water flowing over rocks. "I am Mediator Zilf of the Mordoon Collective. Your species designation has been recorded as Category 4 Developing. You will be assigned appropriate quarters in Section 7 of the lower decks." The armored beast grinned, showing teeth like steel knives. "War Speaker Grokmash of the Urgoth clans welcomes the newest subjects to the Galactic Order. Try not to embarrass yourselves too badly." The transmission ended before any of the humans could respond. Lisa looked at the others with raised eyebrows. "Well, that was charming. Did they just call us primitive?" Amy asked, looking offended. "And subjects," Pete added grimly. "I do not like the sound of that." Roy crossed his arms over his chest. "Typical bully behavior. Come in strong to establish dominance from the first moment." Jake turned back to the navigation console. "Take us in, Sam. Let us see what we are dealing with." The docking procedure took 2 hours and involved more security scans than Jake had ever experienced. Every system on the Liberty's edge was examined by invisible beams of energy. Several times, alien voices demanded explanations for various pieces of equipment. Jake answered each question honestly, but kept the responses brief. When they finally docked, the humans found themselves in a cavernous bay filled with ships from dozens of different species. Some looked like works of art made from flowing metal and light. Others appeared to be grown rather than built with organic curves and surfaces that seemed to breathe. A few were clearly warships with weapon ports and armor plating that could withstand anything. A group of aliens waited for them at the airlock. Most stood well back, but 3 stepped forward. These were the same beings they had spoken with earlier, though now Jake could see them in person. High Chancellor Vextar towered over them all at nearly 9 feet tall. His crystal body refracted the station's lights into rainbow patterns. Mediator Zilf moved with fluid grace, and her tentacles never stopped moving. War Speaker Grokmash looked like he could tear apart a battle tank with his bare hands. "Follow us," Vextar commanded without any pleasantries. "You will be escorted to your quarters and given basic orientation materials. Tomorrow, you will be examined by the Council to determine your species' proper place in the galactic hierarchy." As they walked through the station, Jake tried to take in everything around them. The corridors were huge, with ceilings that disappeared into shadows above. Alien beings of every imaginable shape and size moved through the halls. Some walked on legs like humans. Others floated or slithered or rolled. A few defied easy description. What struck Jake most was the way they all seemed to move in patterns. The smaller or less impressive-looking aliens always stepped aside for the larger ones. Some actually pressed themselves against the walls when certain species passed by. It was like watching a complex dance of dominance and submission. Notice the hierarchy, Roy whispered quietly to the group. Everything here is about who has power over who. Amy was staring at a group of slug-like beings who were literally crawling on the floor to get out of the way of what looked like a group of metallic spiders. This is not what we expected. Their quarters turned out to be small rooms in the lower levels of the station, just as promised. The walls were plain metal and the furniture was basic. It was clean and functional, but clearly meant for species that were not considered important. Category 4. Developing Species. Lisa read from a data pad that had been left on the main table. Technological level insufficient for full membership. Military capacity negligible. Territorial holdings minimal. Recommended. Status. Client species under protection of established power. Pete looked around the sparse room. They have already decided what we are before even talking to us. Based on what? Amy asked. We have achieved faster-than-light travel. We have energy weapons and defensive shields. Our technology may be different from theirs, but it works, Roy picked up another data pad and read through it quickly. According to this, every species that joins the Council must accept one of 3 positions. Major powers who rule over sectors of space. Minor powers who control smaller regions under the protection of the majors, or client species who provide resources and labor in exchange for protection. And they have decided we qualify only for the bottom tier, Lisa said with frustration creeping into her voice. Jake moved to the small window and looked out at the stars. In the distance, he could see Earth's sun as just another point of light among millions. Home seemed very far away right now. The next morning brought their first real glimpse of how the galactic community worked. Alien servants brought them food that had been analyzed and declared safe for human consumption. The taste was bland but edible. More importantly, the beings who served them would not make eye contact and seemed terrified of saying the wrong thing. When War Speaker Grokmash arrived to escort them to the council chambers, he brought with him a dozen heavily armed guards. Each one was different species, but all carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy, standard procedure for new species, Grokmash explained when he saw their expressions. Many become overwhelmed by the majesty of the council and require assistance maintaining proper behavior. The walk to the council chambers took them through the heart of the station. Here the corridors were even larger and more impressive. Holographic. Displays showed star maps with colored regions marking the territories of different powers. Jake noticed that the Kethnari Empire controlled the largest area, followed by the Mordoon Collective and the Urgoth clans. Impressive, is it not? Vextar joined them as they approached a set of doors that had to be 50 feet tall. The result of proper order and discipline. Each species knows their place and fulfills their role. The strong protect the weak, and the weak serve the strong. It is the natural way of things. The doors opened, and the humans got their first look at the Grand Council chambers. It was beyond anything they had imagined. The room was a vast amphitheater that could hold thousands. Tier after tier of seats rose up in all directions. At the center was a raised platform, where they would presumably make their presentation, but what really caught their attention was how the seating was arranged. The largest and most impressive aliens sat in the front, rows on elaborate thrones and platforms. Behind them were smaller species in simpler seats. At the very back, Jake could barely make out tiny beings that looked like they might be standing rather than sitting. "Behold the natural order of the galaxy," Mediator Zilf said, with what might have been pride. 237 species, all working together in perfect harmony. Roy leaned close to Jake's ear. "Perfect harmony, my ass? This looks more like a prison with the inmates sorted by how dangerous they are.